Whispers of the Past, a historical fiction that reimagines pivotal moments with a twist. Act Y, The Unveiling. The manuscript awakens. The past whispers back. Chapter 1. The Summons, Carpathian Mountains, Romania. Present day. The envelope arrived with no stamp, no return address, just a wax seal pressed into old paper, cracked at the edges like it had been sealed centuries ago. The seal bore a symbol Evelyn Harrow didn't recognize, a quill intersecting an hourglass. She turned it over 3 times before daring to break it. Inside was a single card, hand-inked in calligraphy too perfect for any human hand. You are requested at the monastery of St. Iosif. There is a manuscript. It bears your name. Come alone. No date. No signature. No explanation. The wind outside Evelyn's Oxford flat rattled the stained glass panes as if trying to echo what she already felt. This was not an invitation. It was a reckoning. She held the card under the kitchen light and traced the letters with her thumb. The ink shimmered not black but dark blue like midnight. It smelled faintly of cloves and something older. Parchment? Dust? Blood? In another life, she might have dismissed it. A prank. A forgery. Another elaborate trap for a historian too deep in old books and her own obsessions. But Evelyn Harrow hadn't lived another life. Only this one. The one where she'd already seen dates rewritten. Artifacts appear where no record existed. Entire cities described in journals then struck from maps. And now, a manuscript bearing her name. By sunrise, she was on a flight to Romania. The drive into the Carpathians was slow, coiling like a serpent through mountains cloaked in early snow. Her driver, a silent man with eyes too pale for comfort, never glanced back at her. The car, a black Lada that looked like it had outlived the cold warm, oved as though each mile cost it something. Evelyn tried to ask questions twice. Both were ignored. At last, the monastery appeared. St. Iosif rose out of the fog like it had been built by memory alone. Its stone walls were veined with ivy, blackened by weather and time. Bell towers jutted toward the clouds like warning fingers. One window glowed faintly with candlelight. The car stopped. The driver pointed. "You walk from here," he said, his voice dry and cracked. And then he was gone. Evelyn approached the gates, boots crunching over gravel older than England. The gates groaned open before she touched them. Waiting in the courtyard was a man in a worn cassock and gloves stitched with strange symbols. His face was sharp, drawn tight by decades of silence. But his eyes, they weren't entirely human. "Dr. Harrow," he said, "we have waited a long time." "I wasn't aware I had an appointment." "No one is," he replied. "But all arrive on time." He turned and walked without further explanation. Evelyn followed. The corridors of St. Iosif whispered, not with voices, but with echoes, pages turning where there were no books, footsteps when no one walked. The walls were lined with relics, broken swords, petrified scrolls, faded icons whose eyes followed her like watchers. The monk Lucian he finally offered led her down a spiral staircase lit by iron sconces. They descended so far, Evelyn lost track of how deep they were. Time thinned with every step, like the air forgot which century it belonged to. At last, they entered a chamber. No doors, no windows, only a pedestal. Upon it, the manuscript. It wasn't a book, not in the normal sense. It was bound in dark leather, etched with a language Evelyn didn't know and yet understood. Its cover bore no title, but her fingers tingled when she reached for it, as if the book recognized her. Lucian watched, unmoving. Evelyn opened it. The first page was blank, so was the second, and then the third bled into words, one line, written in the same ink as the summons. "You are the fracture. You are the thread. You are the one who forgot." She blinked. The words were gone, replaced by a sketch of a city Rome, but wrong. There were towers, structures not built until centuries later, machines flying overhead like crows made of silver. Below in the margins, a signature. T.H. Her breath caught. "Antonia Harrow," she whispered. "My ancestor." Lucian's voice broke the silence. "Your bloodline began the first fracture. You are its echo." "What is this?" Evelyn's voice shook. "A forgery?" "Truth misplaced. Memory exiled." He stepped forward. "You must find the rest of the manuscript. This is only one piece." "Why me?" "Because you are not only a historian," Lucian said. "You are a continuation." She stared down at the pages. Now they rippled no breeze, no touch. Just movement like the parchment was alive. A final line surfaced before vanishing into the vellum. If you remember too soon, they will come. If you remember too late, the future dies. Evelyn stepped back, but it was too late. Behind her, the chamber door once invisible had closed. Above ground, time held its breath. The bell tower struck 13. And in the stillness beyond the mountain, something ancient stirred. Something that had been waiting for her name. Chapter 2. The Road to Silence. Transylvania borderlands, en route to St. Iosif Monastery. The driver said nothing as the road bent into frost and shadow. The snow came in veils thin, silent, and strangely rhythmic, as though falling to a beat Evelyn couldn't hear. Trees lined the path like watchmen, their branches gnarled with age, their trunks too symmetrical, too still. Somewhere behind the static of the radio, she thought she heard a voice whisper her name. Twice. She said nothing. The Lada's headlights cut narrow tunnels through the fog. They passed no towns, no signs, no markers of time or distance. Only the road, winding ever higher into mountains that didn't want to be named. Evelyn had studied maps obsessively the night before. This path wasn't on any of them. She checked her watch. It had stopped. 20 minutes ago. Outside, a figure stood by the road. The driver didn't slow. Evelyn turned to see an old woman in rags, eyes blank, holding a scroll in one hand and a lantern that flickered blue. But as they passed, the woman dissolved not into the snow but into light, like smoke reversed. "Did you see that?" Evelyn asked. The driver didn't blink. She turned back. The road was empty. Snow thickened. Time unraveled. Evelyn saw Rome, or what might have been Rome, rising in the valley below, half lit by electric lamps, half formed in ruins. A curved Colosseum stood beside a glass structure that hummed like machinery, but when she blinked, it was gone. Replaced by pine trees, she saw Harriet Tubman walking a ridgeline, a digital wristband glowing on her arm. Gone. She saw a Viking ship sailing through a frozen canal, flanked by skyscrapers under construction. Gone. The manuscript had done something. Or the monastery. Or she was dreaming. She placed her palm to the cold window. The fog from her breath left a print in the shape of an hourglass. Evelyn flinched. The road turned sharply and descended into a long valley that seemed untouched by time. No birds. No tracks. Only snow and silence. Not quiet. Silence. The kind that felt alive. Listening. At a narrow pass where the mountains closed in, the driver finally spoke.
"Beyond here," he said, "you will hear things that have no mouth. Do not answer them."
His voice was different now. Younger, but older. It echoed like a memory. She stared at him. "Who are you?" His eyes met hers in the mirror just for a moment. Then the engine stalled and died. They were alone. The driver stepped out without a word and began walking backward into the mist. Evelyn called after him. He didn't stop. He didn't leave footprints. For a long time, she sat in the dead car, the cold creeping into her bones like an accusation. Her phone had no signal. The GPS pulsed between nowhere and null. And in her coat pocket, the manuscript card, the one that summoned her, felt warm. She stepped out, and the air changed. Not temperature, texture, as if time had become heavy. Snow fell around her like ash, silent and slow, but above the sky was a clear blue-black, dotted with unfamiliar constellations. Her breath came out in clouds that didn't rise, they hovered. And then she heard it. A voice low, urgent, near. "Evelyn, remember," she spun. No one. Again. "The fracture begins at the door." She turned in circles. The trees whispered. Her heart pounded. Then she saw it. A stone gate, tall and curved, standing in the snow alone, unattached to any wall or structure. Just a freestanding arch, old and cracked, pulsing with faint light. Drawn to it, Evelyn moved forward. Etched across the top, per memoria, per manus. Through memory. Through hand. A whisper echoed behind her. "Do not go through," another closer. "Go through now." She stepped to the threshold. The snow stopped midair, frozen. Suspended, she reached out a hand and it passed through the gate. For one breathless second, she saw a flash, a battlefield with no sound, time loops spinning like orbits, and a woman who looked like her but wore armor marked with burning sigils. She recoiled. The vision vanished. The snow fell again. Evelyn backed away from the arch. A deep bell sounded from above the ridge. Once, twice, 13 times. Behind her, the road resumed narrower, steeper, and now visible again through the trees. She took one last look at the freestanding gate and walked on. The monastery appeared just as the sky began to pale gray smudges of dawn threatening to arrive. But the sun never quite broke the horizon, as though light itself had made a pact not to intrude. Saint Joseph rose out of the mist like a story half-remembered. Gothic towers leaning toward the wind, walls inked with ice, windows flickering as if candlelight inside was arguing with another dimension. A bell swung soundlessly in one of the towers. She reached the gate. It opened before she touched it, and Father Lucien stood waiting. "You came the long way," he said softly. "It was the only way I saw. There were others. You just didn't remember them." Evelyn's fingers curled into fists. "What's happening to me?" "You are remembering forward," Lucian said, stepping aside. "Come inside before the silence arrives." She stepped through the gate. This time she felt it close behind her like a final sentence. A gate. A fracture. A woman who remembers the future too late. And somewhere, just behind the walls, a manuscript turned its own page. Chapter 3. The Monk Who Waited. St. Iosif Monastery Reception. Winged Father Lucian did not walk so much as glide his steps soundless against the stone, his robes neither rustling nor dragging. He moved with the certainty of someone who had already lived this moment, who had waited for Evelyn not for days or months, but epochs. "This way, Dr. Harrow," he said. His voice, low and deliberate, echoed in the hallway even when he whispered, "The manuscript chamber is being prepared." The monastery's interior looked like it had been carved out of memory itself. Walls of rough-hewn stone, stained glass windows blackened by age, candle sconces that sputtered as if protesting their own existence. Symbols were everywhere, etched into floors, corners, ceilings. Some Evelyn recognized: alchemical glyphs, astrological sigils, biblical Greek. Others were older, hungrier. "Why me?" she asked finally, following him down a corridor that bent like a spine. "You were summoned," Lucian said. "I never applied for this. I don't even know who sent the letter." Lucian stopped, turned. "The letter wasn't sent," he said. "It was returned." He gestured to a door, tall, iron-bound, inscribed with Latin verses that shimmered faintly in the flicker of torchlight. Memoria tenet formam. Oblivio tradit veritatem. Memory holds the form. Forgetting betrays the truth. "This is your room." Evelyn frowned. "You mean guest quarters?" "No," Lucien said, resting a hand on the latch. "Your room." And with that, he opened the door. It was not what she expected. No crucifixes, no icons, no threadbare cot, no austerity. Instead, the room was flooded with soft blue light from a circular window that should not have existed, too high for this floor, too large for this structure. The walls were lined with bookshelves, ancient volumes that pulsed faintly at the edges, like the spines were breathing. Fireplace crackled with fire that gave off no smoke, and on the mantel sat a sculpture her family crest, one she hadn't seen since childhood. At the center of the room stood a desk. On it, a journal. Leather-bound, locked with a clasp, inscribed on the cover. Evelyn walked in slowly, unease settling over her like frost. She reached for the journal. Her fingers trembled. The lock clicked open before she touched it. Inside, sketches of symbols she didn't recognize but somehow had drawn. Timelines looped into spirals. Equations written in her own handwriting but reversed, as if written in a mirror. And on the final page, a note. "Do not trust the room. It remembers more than you do." Lucien stood in the doorway. "This chamber was built over the buried foundation of a collapsed sanctuary," he said. "It listens." "You're serious?" The stones contain traces of obsidian. In certain compositions, they can absorb fragments of memory. What some call relics, we call residue. She turned to him. "Is this why I'm here? To hallucinate in a haunted monastery?" Lucien stepped into the room. The blue light dimmed as if in his presence. "You are here because something in this place has already known you. The manuscript will show you what your waking self cannot. But this room, this is where the veil thins. Most visitors never see what you are seeing." "Have there been many before me?" Lucien hesitated. Then, "Only one?" Evelyn's throat tightened.
My ancestor.
Lucien nodded.
Antonia Harrow, the last to sit in that chair. She opened the manuscript before she burned.
Evelyn sank slowly into the chair, the wood warm against her back as if someone had just vacated it. She opened the journal again. This time the ink moved, shifting from symbols into words. The fracture begins here. Beneath memory, beneath mercy. Look beneath the floor. She glanced at Lucien. I didn't write this.
No,
He said.
but you will.
Later, after Lucien left her to rest, Evelyn began inspecting the room more carefully. She tapped the floorboards, tracing the worn edges. One near the hearth sounded hollow. She knelt, pried it loose, and found a compartment.
Inside, a relic.
A small cube of crystal, warm to the touch, etched with circuitry that pulsed with blue light. Impossible. It was modern. Postmodern. She had seen schematics like this in DARPA archives. Technology that wasn't public. Tech that hadn't even been made yet. Beneath the cube, a folded note.
The silence is already here. Don't let it touch your thoughts.
Sound behind her. She stood quickly. No one, but the room had shifted. The books were rearranged. The fireplace was now cold. The circular window had vanished. Time had folded in on itself. In the far corner, carved newly into the wall, was a single word. Remember. Lucien returned at dusk. He found her sitting cross-legged by the hearth, the journal in her lap, the crystal still faintly glowing beside her.
You shouldn't have opened the floor,
He said gently.
You knew I would.
Yes.
Why does this room know me?
Because history is not only written in ink, Lucien said, stepping into the threshold. It is written in space, in ash, in echo. You are not just reading the past here, Evelyn. You're stepping into it, and it remembers you. She stared at him. What is this place? Lucien gave the faintest smile.
A monastery, yes. But before that, a fortress. Before that, a temple. Before that, we don't know. But some say it was the first sight to forget a truth.
Wind howled beyond the windowless stone. Somewhere far below, a bell told not of time, but of transition. Evelyn stood facing the fire again. It's not just history you're keeping here, she said quietly. It's what history forgot. Lucien nodded. And what it dared to remember.